Thank you very much for having me here. I feel very humble. I'm a bit out of my depth because I think just watching everybody's. I'm on the other side. I'm one of the scribblers that just play with ink while you study what we do, what we scribble. But it's been a fascinating, 3 fascinating days. And I hope it makes sense what I'm going to explain. Basically, this first part, I'm going to go through more like story of my influences since I was a younger kid. We were just talking yesterday about how sometimes you start reading comics when you're close to 30. Sometimes you remember comics since you can remember, basically. So everybody has a different way to enter into this beautiful medium. And in my case, I'm going to go through a lot of that first information through early years until I was finishing basically my teens and early 20s. And because I had a gap that I wasn't making any comics actually until I realized I wanted to really make comics and started making them. I really started less than 10 years ago taking it seriously. In the last 6 years, I've been doing it really, really, truly. So this is basically my Bible. It's a book called Literatura de la Imagen. It's from Biblioteca Salvat. There was a lot of books with different themes, and this one was the one I suppose I was like 6 or 8 years old the first moment I saw it. And I was very lucky in the way that it was very obvious to me since the beginning that comics weren't just or superheroes or cartoons or something like that. It was a whole medium with many, many possibilities and with even many continents and countries interlaced. So even from the cover, you can see Shazam, you can see Flash Gordon, you can see Felix the Cat, Popeye, Peanuts. It's a bit of everything. And actually, I didn't read this book until my maybe early 20s. I would just watch the images and imagine where those came from. It was just windows for me to try to imagine other worlds and many different styles. There weren't even pages, just some strips, some images, but it was always very much inspiring. You had a bit of everything. I just put some 6 images or something like that for each subject I'm going to touch. But it was basically just blowing my mind absolutely all the time. And you had a lot of different things through different periods. So it would go to many places. But for me, that was my first basically thing that influenced me. And I feel very blessed that I got to this. So I didn't really start with a narrow view, but a very open view to, I don't know, anything can happen, right? There's Mafalda, Tintin, Corto Maltese. And it was, I don't know, maybe in my middle 20s, early 30s that I finally got to get some of his comics. And they were like, okay, yeah. Because I was very used to, in Peru, this is basically the middle of the 80s to the middle of the 90s, something like that. So it was very hard. There were no comic shops in Peru. It was not easy to get. Sometimes you could have secondhand books on the streets, and you can go through a lot of magazines and found some secondhand comics that you didn't know how they arrived, but they arrived. So it was very much research and going into the middle of the city and trying to find whatever you could find. There was no shop. I was very much used to, for example, if I could read any superhero comic that usually you have an arc, so you have 5, 6 issues telling one story. For me, cliffhanger was the end of any story because that was it. I never finished reading the story. I just had one single issue here, another single issue here, and that was it. That was very normal for me. I'm not so used to reading superhero comics in that way because I could never go to next month and pick up the next issue.
These are scans of your own copy, aren't they?
Yes. Yeah. It's
very well done.
I think literally it's more. I think it's definitely my most valued book. Yeah, it's in Edinburgh. This copy is no, it's attached to.
Pretty comprehensive.
Yeah, it's the first love in a way.
Well, do you have particular characters or styles that you were drawn to this?
I definitely wasn't. I've always been very much inclined towards something more realistic and automatically not so much into anything cartoony like Felix the Cat or something like that. But I think that's what I would draw, but I would read anything. So maybe there was Little Nemo was very fascinating. I couldn't understand anything, and you can see you have just a chalk page. So I really didn't get it until I went for the first time to USA and got actual collections, and it was like, oh, okay, now I get it. It was very surprising, but no, it was basically many images that were. I was just imagining what would happen if I would have any of these ones, and I just want to create some stories. Then later, I was also very lucky. Many of the books and many of the accessibility for me. My dad used to work on another advertising company, so he had access to people that would like comics. So many times he would have access to the actual comics. Sometimes there were lens of lens, so he would photocopy comics for me and things like that. But he was always trying to bring me anything that he would find interesting and that he would think it would be interesting for me. This one he brought him. I think he got it in Brazil. It's I think it's from the end of the 80s, maybe. I think it's a graphic magazine from Brazil, and it was portraying many different artists, and in particular Argentinian artists. And the same, these were just samples, not actual pages of stories, but this was more influence on illustration rather than storytelling, sequential storytelling. This is the first time I saw them, and then later I could read some of their stories. This is Carlos Mime, Enrique Breccia. That I think that page blew my mind for even until now. And it's not a page actually. I mean, that's a full page, but I think it's it's a 9-panel brief, but they put it like that just to show the graphics. Inodoro Pereira from Fontana Rosa. I think that's Calvi. Horacio Altuna and Munoz. The same. Many years passed until I could read, for example, some Munoz. That was the only image I could have of Munoz. Then later, the same, my dad brought this one. I think I was maybe 10, 12, and that was the first time I could read Carlos Trillo's story. This one is drawn by Enrique Breccia again. And it's funny because you have several levels of reading. The first time I saw it, this is a very sarcastic view on many, I don't know, it's very ironic. It's a lot of dark humor that has two levels of reading. And so I couldn't understand it. I mean, I could read, but I didn't get the joke until later, where I could really get my copy when I was maybe 14, 15. I was like, oh, okay. Now I get it. It's like reading Mafalda that we were talking before. You're younger and some jokes you get them. And then when you're a bit more into politics or know how the continent works, it's like, okay, now I get why this is funny because I didn't understand it. But visually, maybe Enrique Breccia might be my biggest influence even until now. I think how organic his line works and how it flows basically, and how he handles the graphic narrative manages to really work out the whole page as a whole system of reading. I always find amazing. He can do anything. And this was also the first time I could see in this one he draws themselves. It's Carlos Trillo and Enrique Breccia, them playing the strings for Marco Mono, and some other creature is handling the same for them. So it was just the different levels of reading were really amazing. This one shows them. He's saying somebody's moving. I don't know the threats over me. Somebody's controlling me, and you see them controlling the character, and then you see the hand controlling them, and then you see another hand controlling them, and then you see more threats, and you have no idea who's moving the threats, and it says in the end it says and like that until the end. So no one knows. This one, I was very much into Master of the Universe when I was a kid. I couldn't allow the toys, but I would watch them a lot. But I could go to the shops. And when I was in my teenager, 14, 15, they were already old toys. It's that I got to buy them. I know there were some shops that could happen by basically secondhand, or they were a bit like leftover toys. And I realized they all came with these mini comics, and especially the ones made by Alfredo Alcala, saying how I started drawing a lot of mini comics on my notebooks, basically emulating these kind of stories. It was just adventures. It was just trying to make a funny story. It's this moment when you're still playing and drawing. So it's like when you're playing, somebody attacks somebody and something is close. So in that way, there's no structure of narrative. You just go to the end and just connecting things that are happening. So that was playing and drawing at the same time in that way. And the anatomy, I think even until now, a lot of the influence on how I handle anatomy came from Alfredo Alcala, who was maybe not that great as a comic artist in this one, as a narrative structure, but the anatomy and how he portrays the power of the characters is, I think it's just great. There was something like a hidden epicness in it, you know, because they look more like skills or like a story being told than actual sequential comics. They were really small, so we had only room for 2-3 panels.
You can see it kind of Jack Kirby.
I guess the whole Master of the Universe, even connected to the cartoon, has a lot of influence from here because we have magic and you have technology at the same time. I think. Yeah. So it definitely showed. But it was this I don't know. And then the same, like I was saying, they were length sometimes of the books. The first running I had for Frank Miller were like 7 pages of photocopies, maybe black and white, and I was reading it. I could just glance at them, wondering what that was, and my English was not enough to read all the slang he was using. But that was it for me running until I told a friend when I was in my early 20s in university. He told me, that's from Miller. I don't know anything about it. And then we managed to find the book. But for me, running were just some pages from, I don't know.
You just got to the pages somehow.
Yeah, my dad had a friend that had the book, but it was a length, so he couldn't take it home. So I just received some photocopies. I just had some photocopies. But the same, the visual narrative was just too wild. I didn't know anything about the story. I didn't understand. I realized there was some technology involved, magical and Japanese culture, but other than that, it was very confusing. You can just have some pages, you understand the whole background of the story. But it was very inspiring, influenced me a lot because just before this, I think I was a bit influenced by the same. I had some photocopies in Portuguese from La Piada Mortal, which is the Killing Joke. And it was Brian Boland, very clean, very neat. And then comes this thing that even the panels are just a scratch, very Japanese influence brush. So it was like, okay, so I can be dirty at the same time, and just showing you options to experiment with your line. And
I can see this Delta plan on some of your work.
Yes.
The influence of this, the fighting.
Definitely, yeah, definitely. And the thing is, in some moment, as long as you continue to keep on drawing and develop your craft, your hands, you get used to your tools. So they don't move by themselves, but they kind of remember where they were. So they just move, and you get a bit more use and confident of what you're going to achieve. So in some moment, it feels a bit more like drawing. So it's like, yeah, that's a word. That's not like, oh, I don't know if I will handle to manage to create this drawing, but it's more like, I think I guess how it's going to work in the end. Yeah, I just have to finish the letters. So,
let us check. Oh, hey, are we recording? Yeah.
And please feel free to interrupt me at any moment if you have any kind of questions or anything. I'm very happy to have any kind of conversation about this.
This is great. I still have my original when it was first published, right?
Oh, really?
Yeah.
So the issue.
The issue, yeah.
Oh. No, I have the actual bundle.
Premium paper at the time, like a major thing.
Ah.
Premium paper, and it was special time of coming.
Yeah. Then at the same time, I managed to find in these second-hand street places. There were some Argentinian comics that also blew my mind. Scorpio was one very important, and the same team, Carlos Trillo and Enrique Brecha, in this case with Alvar Mayor. I think in this case, Alvar Mayor influenced me a lot in the illustration again and the narrative, but they tackle a lot of stories of post-colonial, no, actually pre-colonial South America and Peru. So when still people didn't know about El Dorado, and there were some myths about the fall of the Incas, and this guy, the main character, Alvar Mayor, he's the son of a native woman and a Spanish man, so his life is divided. Every Spanish person living in South America doesn't like him, and every Peruvian or any South American doesn't like him either, because he's not one of them. He's a bit unique in that he's mestizo, but it doesn't happen that much. You have natives and Spanish, then little by little they get a bit more mixed. But so that investigation in South American culture was very interesting. The same, you had all the background about the jungle or the Andes and all these amazing places with kind of magical, but at the same time, you have very strong characters and very strong dramatic things happening. So you have these important characters and the background is already amazing. But for moments, you feel you don't know if they're talking a bit more about South America and that time for the characters. You have these two big themes.
A little black.
Yeah, actually, these ones were colored in black and white. I think it even works better. Yeah.
It was originally intended black and white.
I guess so. I'm pretty sure Pablo and Laura should know better. Yeah. What's it?
Sorry. Yeah, originally they were made in black and white, and then after that they were colored, but they have usually been published and nowadays still in black and white.
I guess so, because it feels very much like, okay, we have to put some color now because we're printing this in color, but just arbitrary, not because it was conceptualized as a color.
No, because those magazines were not printed entirely in color. They just chose some of the stories to be colored because it was more attractive, but traditionally, clips. Color was always very expensive to print. So that's why Argentine cartoonists are known or renowned for working in black and white, but pretty much just because they didn't have much jobs.
Yeah, which is fascinating because you have a difficulty and you just tackle that and become something of a master of something that you cannot print easily. But the stories were amazing. Again, the narrative, how you could use panels and in this case time to. This is another one from the same anthology magazine Scorpio, that's called El Condenado. And this is written by Guillermo Sacomano, and the drawings are by what's the name? Mandrafina? Cacho Mandrafina. And the same, these ones were, at least everything I saw was completely black and white. And these were very peripheral characters, kind of very low light, people without black. I think he was, for some reason, they found him guilty of some crime, which he wasn't guilty of. And he's always kind of trying to lay low, and all the characters around his life are similar to that. So a very, yeah, exactly. But very much this kind of low life with nostalgic people dreaming of a better life, a more quiet life, but you have just to keep up and survive every day. Again, very good characters. How his black and whites are just amazing. I learned a lot how you can portray with backgrounds and how you can play with shadows and light however you decide in order to maintain a rhythm of the page. It's not naturalistic. It looks like, but it is not, because it depends how much contrast you can put. If you want to stop a bit or if you want to move forward. So it has it's a very dramatic way of telling stories, playing with silhouettes, playing with really strong blacks, a bit different, but similar in a way to how Brecha approaches black and white. This is again Carlos Trillo with Horacio Altuna. This is Las Cuartitas del Señor López. But it's, I suppose everybody's familiar with this bureaucrat guy that works, has a very small job in an office, just putting stamps and doing very boring job. And every time he enters to a door of the toilet, he enters to his work, whatever it is. So it can transform into anything. And for example, yeah, you can see he just enters from the toilet and enters to a completely different world. And many times he basically loses all the time. He's a very sad guy with no actual character, no actual attitudes. And even in his fantasy, many times he's like, he just tries to lay low as he is in life. So even his fantasies he's a very weak character. This is, again, for some reason, sometimes you were researching stuff. There was a big shop called Scala, I think, something like that, in some part of Lima. And there appeared these quality comic collections of Jet Shred, Rock Trooper, Slane, just some issues. Nobody knows why they didn't sell comics. They were just there, just those, and that was it. So I grabbed as much as I could. And this is where I saw for the first time the work of Mick McMahon, and written by Pat Mills. And Mick McMahon's work was also the same, very scratchy, strong style, playing with shadows, and the level of detail was a very different approach. And actually these were more like US comic size, the ones I have, because you can see there's a lot of points on the top or on the bottom.
They're originally magazine size.
Exactly. I mean, I didn't know anything about that until my parents went for the first time, I think, I don't know, maybe 10 years after this, and he brought me a 2018, and I was like, oh, because internet wasn't there either, so I didn't know they were part of a 2018 magazine. I just knew there was Just Red and Strange and Love.
South American population, the ones that you picked up?
They were from Spain. From Spain, so there was one in Esquerra, so I assumed they were Spanish. So it was just whatever you could pick, whatever you could find, and the same. I could never read the whole story, but I was very marveled. But how he could tackle even these very scratchy. It's never black in this case. It has a lot of very vibrating gray. But still, it's line work. It's very much the first basis of how I tackle my style. This is the same from the same ones. This is Strange and Love from Sierra and Alan Grant. I think the drawings didn't influence me here that much. I mean, it was really good, but it was a bit different to my style. But the war was very interesting. This kind of science fiction places with different races and animals and things happening. There is a lot of science fiction without playing with different things. And it's like the same crime, thriller, really bad characters. Johnny Alpha, he's the underdog. He's not really bad, but it has to be like that because he's a mutant, like all the other mutants. They don't have any choice, right? You have to portray that character because society has made you like that. So I'm just realizing that right now.
Yeah.
I don't know, it was fascinating.
And his character design is really
The character design is good. Yeah, I think the world building and the character design was one of the things that took more impact than the actual drawing style. Yeah, character design was amazing, page after page, because each story would happen, I don't know, secondary characters would appear at every 2 pages, I guess. And so Sierra would have to be producing, I don't know, like crazy, but it was just amazing.
Because we'll probably see later on, you put a lot of thought into your character design.
Yes.
At the end of the books,
Yeah. I find it like it's the best tool to make something very believable, right? It's the thing as you explore a character, and I don't know, for example, when I try to develop dialogue, the first line usually is very basic, it's very boring. And little by little, I go several passes and the dialogue, all of a sudden, in some moment, okay, that sounds more like a voice and not just something you should say. And I do the same with the characters. I need to believe you. You tell me something that doesn't fit with you, doesn't make sense. And that takes you out of the fiction. If I take you out of the fiction, that's it. You're going to leave the book and you won't be interested in the story. And I want you to be with me until the end. So it's kind of trying to grab you. It's like gentle manipulation.
Yeah.
This Spanish one, I think it's in the late 90s, I think they appeared. A lot of Son 84, but the same. There were just some issues, and you would find hundreds sometimes, but just the same issue. So you have to be a bit lucky to keep on digging on these second-hand street stalls. And this is where I saw for the first time the work of Richard Corbin. It was again very much different from what I've seen and how he treated color was very different to my work, but took me some other places, made me imagine some other things. His black and white work was also really good, but the color, I think it was very strange and kind of realistic in a cartoony way, but a very unique approach. And I've always been very much into science fiction and fantasy, so he was tackling exactly the boxes I liked. The character design and most creature design was also amazing. More the illustration side than the sequential side, I guess.
Yeah.
This one also blew my mind. That's Fernando de Felipe. That was again very, very different. This is the first. I never finished the story until very much later because I couldn't have the whole story. And actually, they're republishing right now. I definitely need to get these books. This is The Man Who Laughs, El Hombre que Ríe, and his graphic style was the same, very gritty, very scratchy, but at the same time very cartoony. It was an expressionism that I wasn't expecting. That last huge panel really followed me for weeks. It was so basic. It was almost looks like a thumbnail compared to all the other ones. You can even see that it's blown up. But it was amazing to see that, how he was trying to it works. It already makes you feel very uncomfortable, very weirded out. That's it. You're done. You don't need to do anymore. No.
And we said and instead he was unable to do this
Exactly, because many times, for example, you usually work whatever small size to grab the sequence and not concentrate that much on beautiful drawings, but more on the sequence and the gesture sometimes of what you're trying to tell. And I feel many times that it works out, but the little drawing was that really grabbed the spirit, and it's just that's the job. And yeah, I think that's a lot of respect for the actual craft of storytelling. But I love it. That's really great. That's amazing. And it was, yeah, it's The Man Who Laughs. So it's a very sad, it's a tragedy after tragedy. And it was, I think it's a mixed technique. It's watercolors and maybe color pencils, right? I guess so. But it's color. You could see he was working actually on the page. You could see, you even can see the texture of the paper there. That was for me like, okay. I guess he used watch too. This is Batman Arkham Asylum by Grant Morrison, and I forgot the name. Dave McKean. The same. This one was a huge impact from both sides. The story is amazing, but the graphics of Dave McKean was just shooting to different places because you could see he could change styles completely depending on the scene he was making. So you could see a lot of kind of like staging, color narrative, and how you can separate very easily something to you're in this panel in the middle is completely other place other than the ones on the sides, and that narrative impact was, and also the creature design and the approach to reinvent many of the characters was. And that Joker, I actually managed to see. I was in London for the first time, I guess, or second time when Paul Gravets did this. I think what was the British invasion, and there was, because this is an actual statue, it's an actual play face. So this is a picture intervening. It's a photograph.
Wow.
Yeah. So it's a small sculpture. Yeah, and it's there, something like that. So that's why you can see it's I don't know that depth you can with this very uncomfortable face. He really played with everything. So he sculpted that face, he painted that face, and then he took photographs and painted over it. But the impact was, yeah, you can see a bit. You see this three-dimensional feeling of it that he would scratch and play. Not on everything, but especially, for example, I think the third panel and the last panel are photographs intervening. And basically, when you say splash page, many times it's, I think with Rodri, we were talking the other day ago, it's something like a symphony. You play around depending on what rhythm you want to create. You can make madness, or you can make something just flow softly, or whatever you want to do. And to see these kind of images playing all together, there's so many different levels of reading that was the same. Very, very inspiring to see something that strange and flowing, feeling. It's a very hard reading to go through those panels, but once you get to that, you start seeing that it's like when you go by night and enter to this crazy club, and it's like, wow. And little by little, you realize where the tables are, where the bar is, or whatever. So it takes a lot of work, but in the end, you realize it's a whole page making you feel really uncomfortable and completely misplaced, and you don't know what that is. And little by little, you have to decipher that.
Have you used like physical models, 3D models as well?
Yeah, sometimes I used to work on plasticine since I was a kid. And at some moment I got to a very decent level. When I used to work in Peru, I did figures for advertising, photographs for panels. I used to do a stop motion too with plasticine figures. So I don't make them really finalized, but sometimes when I'm struggling with more about movement than the actual finished look of a character, I make it. For example, the perro in Puno. It's a very tricky creature. Yeah. So I made one very basic in plasticine and would move it to understand how it would move whenever, especially the first sequence, where you see that it's going for them.
Because that's more.
Yeah, but it was not easy to understand that three-dimensional thing. Yeah. In characters, I couldn't do it that much, especially like that, because I prefer very much trying to have a bit more of a expressionist approach. So sometimes it's something is off, like El Hombre que Ríe, but it works out. So I prefer to be anatomically incorrect, but the sequential works, the storytelling works. So because everything depends on the story. It doesn't. You're not making beautiful drawings. You're telling a story. This is a reading thing. So, and that's why you have to handle the rhythm. You don't want people getting stuck and, wow, this is amazing. No. You need to go to the next page. Unless I really want you to stay, because I really like this page. I really want you to stay here. Okay. This one, no. I want you to keep on going. So depending on what you want to do, yeah. Which is mainly the difference between a cover and comic page. The cover is very much there. The usual comic page is more like you just keep on reading left to right. Mignola, I think that was the first time I don't know, his graphic style really had a huge impact on my work. How he manages the blacks and how he works black and white. He doesn't color his work, but he really understands lights, and he really understands how color has to be treated to create the best impact on narrative. And the rhythm he has with his, he has a very evocative rhythm, very particular. And his synthesis is yeah. I always felt it's completely breathtaking how he manages that rhythm, little panels, but that emptiness that really makes you stop a bit. And I mean, he's a great illustrator. He's an amazing narrator, but he's an amazing graphic artist. Other than his illustrations that are also work pretty well, but you could draw whatever you could style you would want to do, and still that would have the same kind of freedom. He understood. He has a very, I think, a very graphic approach to his work. And the older he gets, the more simple his work is. And to my taste, it's way more powerful even now. It's because like it's basically a lot of blacks, but it's just powerful. And he understands. For example, if you imagine that second panel, the character is basically just some lines and some black on the top. But when you put color, he knows that it's going to make that kind of contrast. Yeah. So he knows how to play, and he's been working with his colorists for ages, so he knows they make a proper team.
It's a real economy, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. No, but the thing is, to get to that and make it work well, you need a very good craft. I mean, for anybody that is into more detailed working, I got dream to eventually evolve to something more synthesized. I think it takes more. It's more edgy for me. It's very simple. You just have blacks all over the place, but how it works out. And he doesn't complicate himself that much. Sometimes there was this the Fury, I think. These books that Duncan Fegredo drew under the Fury. I don't remember, but I think it's in some Hellboy, on a horse riding with some other riders. There's an adventure they're going to have, and you could see they share the notes, the communication they were having, and he was asking. I'm trying to understand how to make Hellboy ride a horse because it has a small tail. I don't know exactly where to put the tail. It's going to be on the sides. It's going to be, and Minola just said, just lose it in the shadows. I don't care. That's what I would do. I don't know. That's what. So sometimes something that you don't know how to solve works the best out for you. So it's all your mistakes become your style. But maybe in the end, I don't know. Minola would feel very excited if he could draw very detailed things with just with lines. I don't know. But
we're starting to get now into comics that you have more available in Peru.
Yes, yeah. This is, for example, my first. Yeah, I guess these ones were more like university years. I had some friends that would get some things. But still, it was more people that would go out and bring things or would have access to Amazon. Usually, if you had a friend that was in the States, you could buy the books via Amazon, but deliver in the States, and they could bring it to you. It was still not that many comic shops, just a little bit, but it was a lot easier to access if you have people that had money that could travel to some places. Hellboy, for the first time, I could only manage to have it because I went to Buenos Aires for the first time. So whenever you could travel, you could start getting things. It was still not that many things in Peru. If you were lucky, again, secondhand, but little by little, comic shops were starting to appear, and you would see some books appearing. Very little, but they were appearing. And this is basically maybe my most modern time, because I remember I knew about El Héroe from David Rubin, the hero, because the first time I went to Europe, I decided on the way back, I decided to start drawing comics again because I ran out of excuses of saying I don't have time or something like that. That was 2012, I think. And I talked to a friend that is a writer, and we started creating this story. We did a blog with, I managed to do like 2 issues about a guy that had a black hole on his chest. Happened in Peru. It was early beginnings to make some kind of adventure. And he brought me some books. One of those was this one. And David Rubin's work had a huge impact on the rhythm of style. I haven't read that many manga, but I know he's definitely very influenced. But many other things, including manga, the rhythm, how he manages the panels and how simple and graphic it is, but at the same time, how there's this gritty, strong feeling to his work, and he's a master of his narrative. And how he tackled color was really, really impressive. And the same, this is when you have these pages where you want to explore and create different ways of how you read a page, right? Here you don't go left to right and leave. You make a circle around and then you go back. And in the end, you leave. Makes you stay with you. So he's playing with you. And I love that when you can actually manage to control the reading of somebody.
You have some double page spreads.
Yeah,
The same.
whenever I can pull that off and makes sense. Yeah, many times I like this page. I don't concentrate that much. If I don't need dialogue, I don't put dialogue, and it's more like I want to make you feel the story, not tell you what's happening, but more like do it yourself and see what's explore a bit more yourself. And yeah, his colors, his style, his design of characters, and he's a complete author. So you know, the story itself is completely well crafted. And he plays a lot with the superhero comics on this, but it's Hercules playing that. It's basically Hercules fighting Superman, which is, I think there's a meta reading here that it's a lot of fun. He was just having his fun. This is another one that I really love, that is Paul Hope, colored by Jose Villarrubia. I think the team worked amazingly. It's a very, I'm not very much, I like them, but I'm not very much, I'm not that interested in superhero comics, but I follow artists that I like, and whatever they do, I feel very interested. So in particular, I don't know what's happening to Batman, but I really wanted to read this because I want to see your take on that character, not really the actual character, and how he plays with the whole narrative. And I'm pretty sure I miss a lot of, I don't know, little hints to the actual character for people that really know. But it's a different kind of reading basically. But he has a very strange, to me, approach to Batman that I completely don't understand it, but I think it's just fascinating. And for example, this one, I think that's in a very different way, but that scratchiness and that feeling of it, he's telling also the story a lot by exploring the city, the landscape, the geography that surrounds. So I think, yeah, but for example, in Lima, my second comic, the story happens, you have characters, but one of the big characters is the city itself. Yeah. It's like you exploring a city. And the same, this is 100%. Yeah, because the same kind of exploration that you go, you enter, you look yourself. It's like little by little. It's like, and also that kind of makes you enter a place, and not, it doesn't tell you something. It's more like you feel that you, whatever it is, it's you're bringing a lot to the actual story with your reading in that case, because it's a lot of image reading. You do whatever you want to do with it, but it's taking you someplace that you don't know. You're being trapped. and the rhythm is very Uzbekistan. I think he has a lot of influence from manga. The same.
Yeah.
This is Frederick Peters, but I think is amazing. I think it's Swiss.
Okay.
And he's an author. In this case, I think this is The Smell of, I don't remember right now the name, The Smell of Starving Boys, I think it's a book. But how he manages, I mean, he's an expert in brush. His storytelling is very, very powerful. He's a very big name on France, and he's even won several awards. I don't know, he's very well crafted. It's very simple, but very powerful at the same time. I think most of it is just brush work. This is pachyderm. Takes you also to very strange words, exploring characters. Takes you to very weird places, and his craft is amazing. This is basically something like an autobiography of him, Blue Pills, where he has a relationship with this seropositive woman and everything that it implies. And I think he was working on this story as he would tell the story as he would draw it. He didn't plan it completely, so he didn't know how it got. So it's a bit like a notebook of what's my life right now. It's very interesting. So he goes to many places. He goes to fantasy. He goes to weird psychological thrillers. He manages very beautiful science fiction stories. It's very prolific, and
The color palette is interesting as well.
yeah, and he does everything. As far as I know, I think he manages really well both black and white and color. This is Ama. It's a science fiction. It's very weird, very good science fiction. And one of the things I really like too about his characters, he creates really good characters. So you really follow a character and you don't have just science fiction themes. You really are interested in the characters and very interesting ideas about robots and something like a new way of organic life is happening at the same time that something artificially created. So you have all the mixture of different levels of reading of the whole book. I think this is the last one. This is Umbrella Academy. I love Fabio Moon and Gabriel Bas because I know this is Gabriel Bas' work, but I know that they criticize their work all the time, so you know that it's not 100% him. It's a team. That's one of the powerful tools they have. They can be very honest and very strong about their opinions. Many times I think I've heard Fabio Moon saying that he just looks sometimes comes Gabriel and he tells me, you can do better than that. And he's like, okay, and he has her over the page, which is
Pretty brother.
yeah. And the story is amazing. I'm not interested very much in the Netflix show, but the comic itself, especially the first story, it's called the Apocalyptic. Well, the first bundle was the one that had the biggest impact in my work. I pretty much you can see some Mignola influence on Gabriel Bas' work, and the colors. Yeah. No, not really. It's very much brushwork, very much softening, but it's very strong black and white, very graphic, very clean, but at the same time kind of organic. And the colors are made by Bates Kewer, which is the same colorist that colors Mignola's work.
Right.
So
This could be one of your color palettes.
I think I have definitely some influence from dates too, for sure. And in my case, if you can make it colorful, just make it colorful, because the same, it's a tool to make you stop or to make you go. So we let's go with the narration. Yeah, I think that's it on the influence.
So that's the influences part. Feel free to stand up and stretch. Get some water.
Yeah, sorry for not stopping for a while.
Yeah. Any questions or comments from that so far? Yes.
I have a question. That's really interesting sort of development of your sort of influences and stuff. And one of the things that you mentioned, and having also sort of grown up with that kind of, how would I call it, like fragmented cultural intake? I don't know, like the fact that you find a couple of numbers of things. You never know. You don't know the context, right? So you've seen it,
Yeah.
you get stuck, but you don't have the context. You don't know what this is. And then you go back and sort of, it's almost making like a puzzle, right? So I think that in my own experience too, it's like, I've read this, but I don't know where it came from. I don't know how it got in my hands. And you're constantly trying to build the context around it. So I have a couple of questions related to sort of that experience. First, so clearly, because you don't know the context, perhaps what it was taking to you was the image, like, for example, that book that you know, La Literatura, La Imagen, you know, sort of you were taken by the image rather than the story because you don't know what the story is. So how that influenced or shaped your creation. So not knowing the context, is that more freeing because you're not bogged down by the story? You don't have a story to tell, you don't have a story to follow, you don't know what comes from before or after, you don't feel sort of linked or burdened by that sort of the baggage of that sort of legacy or the meaning of that work. And then when you go back and build that story, because you're reading in the wrong order, do you think that also shapes the understanding of that story? You know, so it's like you're not reading it linearly, you're not doing it sequentially. So let's say that you read, you know, you pick up something in the middle of an adventure or the tension, and then 20 years later, you're like, oh, okay, this is what it was. Oh, okay, so this adventure started here, you know, and you're putting together. So then does that impact your way of understanding sort of that story? Do you go and reset the story, or what remains with you is that moment of that impact, right? So a lot of these things, how do you process, you know, internalize, and how do you think it comes out in your own work?
Yeah, I'm going to start with your last question, comment, because I'm starting to think about it. I'm not sure, but it's very interesting because maybe I don't know, maybe because I've never thought about it, but yeah, in some way, because you have basically fragments, and like you were saying, in the end you finally find the pieces to the puzzle, and it's like, okay, because sometimes I don't know, I've been watching some images that I really wonder what happened here, and in the end I read the stories, like finishing finally I hear the final, what's the joke about? And sometimes it can be very exciting, and sometimes it's like, oh, in my head it went so up, and it was just those pages, those panels were the ones that were really making me go, and it's not that interesting to me. Actually, it's just how it got constructed and elevated in my mind, in my memory. So, and how I construct, I wouldn't know. I maybe not. Maybe it's more like an anecdotic way of finally I can see the final puzzle, but I don't think that has that much an influence when I finally read a story, unless the story itself is an idea or a story that really takes me somewhere that relates to my work or to any idea I have. So it's very interesting, but maybe not to my stories in particular. But sometimes it feels like, oof, yeah, one more. It's like I have my full album of little figures, and finally I have this one, the hard one. About your first question, I remember I used to complain a lot about it. It was definitely frustrating, especially in the beginning. but also you have this excitement about getting things. I remember when I was in university, I got really very much into music, and only 3 people had CDs, and you have like piracy, copies of cassettes, and it was really hard because you had a friend of a friend, and that guy knows somebody that has that disc. So, and it got you really curious about it. So now I think I used to complain about it. Now I couldn't change anything about it because it got me really curious and hungry about it. It get me wondering what's going to happen. Sometimes, like I was telling you, I finished the story. It's like, nah, but you know what? I'm going to stay with that, not with the whole story, because that really got to me. It's like when sometimes you misread don't understand that well a song, and you think the lyrics are a bit different, and that really impacts you. And then when you see the actual lyrics are like, yeah, I like mine better, so I will keep mine. It's a bit of that. So I think I was blessed in a way that it was good enough to keep me going. I was lucky enough that there were basically some Spanish comic books that would arrive. I have no idea how, and Argentina wasn't that far, so for some reason also the same secondhand. But I think that influence was really very important. And if I think about superheroes, I have the fear that I would be too much into superheroes, and that's fine if you like it. But I think the thing is, I see many people that read many things, and they also like superheroes, and I think that's great. You can read anything, whatever interest you have. But I see many people that like superheroes or more like genre-based things. But no, I don't, and it kind of narrows your view, and you're basically, it's like, no, I only eat chips and chicken, or fish and chips, and it's like there's a whole world that you're losing. It doesn't mean that you have to eat everything, but at least try it. It's a bit like that.
Available issue 1 all the way through either digital or rejected. Whereas it was the same in the UK, by the way. American comic, we would go to the newsstand and said, like, you didn't have the main characters because they were printed in black and white, by the way, in the British comic. So you'd have like American comics with like all the B and C list characters, and you pick up one Black Goliath or the Human Fly or something like that. You were thrown in, right? You had to, maybe you'd never find out the end of the story, but
yeah.
But there's something about that which is kind of inspiring. I think bringing you in. A lot of storytelling is like that, right? You don't know.
You don't know. You have to keep your mind open, and there's a lot of gaps, and that's fine. I think it's a good thing to don't have enough information and to try to find that gap. And regarding that, I actually remember, I can connect to events of my life. Oh, the first time I saw this, the first time I had that, and that makes you very curious. And I'm not saying that it's great to have just beautiful bookshops that you can have access to many things, not everything, but many things. But in some moment, I think it's easier that, like yesterday when they were explaining to us a bit how it has changed the habits of reading for some people. Some people just stay on the same because it's easy, it's there, and I will get my next one next week, and I don't have to think about it. And actually, when that changed, he was saying some people, yeah, they kept on reading the same, but some people really changed their habits because all of a sudden they didn't have their usual fix that was just a standard and got a bit more curious. So sometimes scarcity brings curiosity.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, it's very exciting actually to see how over these 3 days things are evolving and taking shape. You know, in the first part in the morning with Laura and Mel, but also connecting with what Emma and Joe did. And now that Rosie asked that question about how the fragmented way in which your cultural repertoire was formed, it made me think as well about what James was saying yesterday about the incompleteness of the archive. And it's absolutely always incomplete. And we have to assume that as researchers that there's always going to be something missing. But it's very interesting now from the point of view of the artist to also see how this incompleteness is there as well in terms of the story that you were reading and you didn't know the ending, but that might be a blessing in disguise or not, depending. How that fragmentation also operates at the level of creation. I think that is really interesting. I have to make a confession about your work. When I found it in Thought Bubble as well, and I was there browsing, you know, and then I saw your stand and I was hooked by the graphics, by the artwork, and I bought, you know, the comics, and I read them and I was like, wow, I mean, it's an impressive artwork. I was really hooked by the cyberpunk and everything, but I have to admit, and I was less hooked by the story. I like the fact that the city itself was a character, and I like that a lot as well. And the approach to the overall kind of series of cities, and the cities, that has something that was very interesting, unique from my point of view. But I thought as well, there was something about the story that, I don't know, maybe there's time to develop that story, and then with more issues, you know, it would be a whole thing, and that would make more sense. The question is, you are developing your stories and your artwork, and you are always working alone, or you are also contemplating working with script writers, or how's that going?
For my Peruvian cyberpunk, it's completely me. So I created the stories, I create the art, and mainly create everything because it's a bit more like my baby. Because it just how it comes out. I really enjoy a lot collaborating with writers and even other artists. I'm also I've been freelancer for the last 2.5 years. So I also work with other writers, and one of the things, my perfect word is do exactly that, to be able to eat and do my thing and also work with other creators, because they will tackle boxes that I won't be visiting, and they will take me places where I wouldn't go. And if possible, if we can actually collaborate, and not just me being the artist drawing your story, but if I can influence that too, so the two together can really tell the story, that's for me is the perfect place. And regarding which actually I'm going to talk about a bit later. Yeah.
Because I think you're going to come up with.
Yeah, I guess so. I guess so. Your answer is going to be answered when I start. Should I?
Yeah, let's go on. So now, so we've covered the influences now. Gustafo's going to show more of his own work, and we're circulating. Probably he has copies.
If you want to.
So part of this is research and reference, and what's really interesting is the Peruvian topography.
Yeah, that's exactly the thing. Just to very quickly, I'm going to talk about just very basic things about Peru, because my stories are basically, it's like you visiting Peru, not being a tourist, but like visiting the Peru that it's on my head. So Peru has a very long strip of coast. You have Machu Picchu, you have the Andes, you have the really high mountains, and then you go to the jungle. So you have, there's a lot of variations in that, but you have these three different geographic areas in the same country. With many different people. You have a lot of native people that don't speak Spanish, or some speak a bit of Spanish. They basically speak Quechua language and Aymara language that's in the Andes. And in the jungle, there's, I don't know, maybe 20 different languages, because there are smaller communities. But at the same time, this is the actual Lima city. It's a very centralized post-colonial country. So everything is Lima, and 1/3 of the population lives in Lima. So basically Peru is Lima, and Lima doesn't care very much about what happens in all the other regions. So there's a very big fracture there. racial and social structure is very much post-colonial. The whiter you are, the more higher in the hierarchy you are, the more middle, the more mixed, you start losing rights. And if you're an actual native, you're basically invisible in a way. So that has a lot of impact on governments and how companies handle the whole area. So it's and that's why my comics are basically, it's facts and crimes and people surviving while showing you the areas, the beautiful areas and the fascinating places. It's a very hectic place. And we also have a very rich past of Incan and pre-Incan, pre-Columbian cultures, many. So I investigate them a lot. I use many of them for imagery, for concepts, but once I digest that, I'm not making a documentary about it. So I will just shift things and change however I need to change them to make my own story, but at the same time that it makes sense and follows its own rules. But the visuals, I think, I feel like now, in the last 10 years, they're finally kind of exploring a bit more, but there's more ways to explore this. I think it was when, I think the first time I saw Princess Mononoke made me think a lot about how they use their culture all the time. And this is basically an ecological film. And the visuals are just fascinating, and how they integrate that to make the story work out. And you follow the characters, and when you finish the story, you in the end you follow the characters and you realize the story you've been told, and you didn't realize that. That's exactly what we were talking. And I think there's a powerful tool of narrative in that way, and to take advantage and in some way to give a value to all the heritage we have. And most of these archaeological elements we have are spread from all over Peru. So I don't want to talk, for me, Lima is very important because it's my city, I'm from Lima. But I want to explore all of Peru, basically. I want to get still we have also a lot of tradition, folk dances, and very different communities that interact very differently. The same, I explore that and I use whatever I need to do for my story. So some things are actually just me picking things and putting them almost as they are, and some I completely change them just to make the story work. But again, visually, I think it's so powerful that it's inevitable for me to not use it. It's too rich not to take advantage of this. Actually, I remember Carlos Trillo once went to gave a couple of talks in Peru when he was alive, and he was telling once, maybe that idea kind of got implanted in my head. He was saying, if you want to make comics and want to maybe work for other companies and that, don't try so hard to make superheroes. Don't try to make New York stories. They have like 300 other New Yorkers doing better because they live there. So why not try to be a bit exotic? Do something that they don't know. And I didn't decide because of that, but I feel lucky that I got very interested in doing these stories about Peru, because maybe I could be very interested in doing New York stories. I don't choose that. But in this case, I'm lucky that I can explore. And the more I explore, it's like there's a lot to go. There's so much material that this is the fauna we have, especially the jungle is the one that has the biggest fauna. And for example, this is the one I was showing you before. This is Peru, in the middle of South America. And if you see the 5 names, those are the 5 books you're holding. So each book, Trujillo and Lima, are one-shot stories. It's the whole world building. They live in the same world. It's a world building. That's what I can keep on exploring and maybe even connecting more characters if I feel like. But it happens in the same world, in more or less the same time. But Trujillo, Lima, that's on the coast, and those are two one-shot stories. And the ones on the right, Manu, Puno, and Pilcuyo, each one of those are areas. So my first way to start exploring my stories is like when you travel, you go to a place and you get lost and you try to, it's more like a traveler and not a tourist, because a tourist will buy just the memorabilia and oh, that's funny, and I will make my selfie on that castle or whatever. But this is more like go and try things. This is weird. I don't know it. And when you go into a city and you just start going to the right and you get lost in the city, and you maybe you won't be able to tell me what are the more touristy places, but you know how it feels, how it smells, how the people sound like, and what's the sound of the place. So I try to first grab that and explore an area, and then while I do that, I start exploring the story.
Building a Gustaffo.
Yeah, in a way, because it's the Peru that it's my Peru. It's not Peru, right? It's very much Peru, but it's my Peru.
That's great. Feel free to jump in if you want to ask me.
Well, actually, you're watching the comics right now. So.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah, please.
So I just had the opportunity to see just one of them. It's really fascinating. But looking at the images that you are showing, that you are really trying to make use of sort of those cultural elements that per se are so amazing visually and engaging. But you're constructing this sort of different world for people that have not been perhaps to Peru, that have not had the opportunity to see some of the artwork or, being in the different sort of natural environments of the country. So how do you think about that point of entry? How do you build that world to make sense to others that have never been to Peru, that they don't know much about it? What sort of, I see that at the back, you sort of tell the story about you, how you transform things and sort of a little bit of the process. Mm-hmm. But how do you start building that world for your readers that might not be familiar with anything about Peru?
Yeah, actually, I got a very similar question last year, just before this Thought Bubble Festival. I got invited to the Leeds University to give a talk about students making a degree in comic sequential, and there was this girl, I don't remember where she was from, maybe Singapore, I don't remember, but she was also trying to tell stories about her culture, and she wasn't feel completely sure how much to put or how maybe to push what, and I don't care. So that's the quick answer. The thing is, this is the first one I did, Trujillo, and I had the idea in my head for a while. It was living there. So I just needed to draw and to develop it, but the story was there. I knew the finishing, I know the middle, I just needed to put more seasoning and spice, but it was there. And for example, I just did it. I never thought anything about it. And I never thought about I don't know what people are going to say. I just did it. And to my surprise, people got interested in it. I remember I went to my second Thought Bubble Festival just on my rucksack. I had 10, 15 copies to show it to some people, maybe to editors, maybe to writers. And I met this writer. He's American, but he lives in Germany. And he told me, can I see it? Yeah. And I showed him. We were kind of getting friendly. And he told me, can I buy it from you? And I was like, and he saw my face, oh, is that uncomfortable? And I told him, no, I just wasn't expecting that question because I just did it. I was never thinking about it. And I've been doing it that way, but I think in some way, now I think about that. And I will tell the story however I need to tell it. I will bring as much culture as I can, whatever it's easier for the story. Some people are like, I don't know, I've seen some people telling, no, I really like science fiction, so I'm not really into this. And it's like, what's science fiction to you, right? Spaceships, because you're really lacking view. And some people get really interested. Some people really know bits of Peru, so they get a bit more excited about them. And for example, in the beginning, I could put a bit more of captions, maybe translating some things, because I put some things in Spanish, in Peruvian Spanish, in Quechua, and some are just slang that unless you're from Lima or some parts of Peru, you won't get it. So especially the last books, the last maybe Manu and Puno, it's really hard that anybody will understand, even Peruvians will understand 100% all the words. And it's not important words, it's just one word that you assume that must mean food or something like that. So it's not really important, but I think talking about the sound, the smell, the authenticity that you're bringing to the story.
I was actually reading because when they refer to like food and they're going to read and cook and so on. Would it be worth having, because you're curious about what is that? Would it be worth having that in the back somewhere, some reference?
Yeah.
If you had it in a story, maybe it would take you out. Do you want people to go Google themselves?
Actually, the thing is, for example, we have one in Manu. There's one conversation with the main characters, Lila and Sonia. And in some moment, she mentions a word, I want to take you to a Huarique.
Yeah.
And Huarique, it's a slang that I don't know exactly if it's Quechua or Ashaninka or some term from the jungle. I think I'm not sure where it comes from, but it's very much, it's a very particular thing. It's mainly restaurants that used to be homes. So more like if your mom cooked really well and in some moment she opens a garage and people start going, and by word of mouth, people start going, or just small restaurants where they serve very local food, but it's not restaurant, it's very local, very particular food that, and usually the customers are people that know that already. So it's not big on the media. Now it's different, but it's a big explanation of this kind of food. And I remember on Twitter, actually, two readers that I know were discussing about Huarique, and they found the translation and they knew, and they were discussing the actual meaning of that. That just made me smile, because that was amazing. Because again, going back to being curious and maybe not giving you enough information. If that puts you off, if that's not enough for you, that's fine, that's great. But if it gets you curious, for me, that's amazing, because I really pick your interest. And for me, many times, I don't know, my English got more decent whenever I started reading, because I wanted to read comics and play video games. But I already had the curiosity because of it, not because I had to. So it's easier for you to get a bit more inspired by something or get curious about it. So I might explain things and that, but not for being definitely didactic in a way. It's more like I really want to explain a bit more of details, or if I find something interesting. But that's why I stopped using in my stories. I don't know if I have something maybe in Lima. Yeah, for example, you have the yellow caption that says star head, and I say cabeza clava. I don't do that. I think in Lima I stopped doing that, because it's like, do your research. It's not that hard, and you won't lose the meaning. You saw a big robot entering the room and killing people, so it's not like you won't get lost. So it's just piquing people's curiosity. I just play with that. I think it makes more sense to me. In my last book, there's a part where there's a phrase they say that is todo tiene su final, that translates like something like everything has an end, everything finishes at some moment, but it connects with a song. There is a salsa from Hector that it's sung by Hector Lavoe, and there's a rhythm to it, there's a sound to it. So we were looking ways, because I use writers to help me with adaptation. The last one was with Fraser Campbell, and we were looking ways to adapt it. But in the end, it was like, you know what? I'm just going to leave it in Spanish because it doesn't make any sense. And the same with another phrase. There's, I don't remember, but there's another phrase that is, I didn't change it. The same, because you will find the same rhythm. You will understand the story. You won't miss it. But if you look for it, you might find a bit more of information. And it wouldn't be honest. I suppose that if at some moment bigger editors get interested in that, maybe I will have to do that. But as long as I have control, which makes more sense for a broader public, maybe that's a bit too much. But while it's still completely under my control, yeah, I can play with my toys. Yeah.
So you're going to show us some more pages, but also you're going to show some designs from
Yes. Maybe I talk about a bit. The thing is, Trujillo was the first one. I had the story done in my head, like I said, and when I finally managed to make it, things. The saying is exploration and being curious. I had this sequence with the dogs attacking this dogs that are completely full with neurostimulants, drug, and this is where it started the actual cyberpunk, biopunk mixture. And in the beginning, I had a story to make it with some motorcycles and some guys going, but little by little, I started exploring a bit more Trujillo. And we have in the whole coast, even until you go up to Mexico, you will find different breeds of these hairless dogs. We also have them in Peru. It's different breeds, but it's actually South American dogs. And it felt more Peruvian in a way. It felt visually more interesting. So basically, by exploring the area, in the end, I end using the animals, but it was basically research and being playful with the idea, and the same with the guinea pigs. So I started connecting that because it's part of our tradition. Many shamans, especially from the north coast of Peru, they heal you, they pass you literally the guinea pig, and in the end they kill it because it sucks whatever is making you feel bad. So I mix many of those things, and that's through research that you get to that, and then I start combining all these elements. So it's the same. It's based on things that actually happen, and then I put whatever ingredients I want to have. But I grab, if I find something that is interesting, that is very local, I use it if it helps tell the story. And I think it's a more, I don't know, gets you a bit more hooked and interested in the story. For me, it's more fun, but at the same time, many people tell me, yeah, no, the people remember the guinea pigs. It's these kind of elements, yet just by being playful. With Lima, it was a bit different. It was more like the love letter to my city, and we have a lot of gallinazos, these black vultures, in the city, because we have a lot of rubbish. Very well. Yeah, exactly. And so in this one, I managed to tell the story I wanted to tell, but the city was, as you can see, very important, and the people and the secondary characters were very, very important. Actually, if you see it well, that basically that's an image that could happen any day in Lima. There's no science fiction thing there. I didn't need it to tackle that. Then I put the elements, because also my world building is not like 300, 500 years. It's something like 100, maybe 150. Enough to have technology, enough to mess it up, but enough to still places look still a lot like they look like now. Yeah, it's the same. It's a lot of research. I spent a lot of time on research, on reading things and downloading hundreds of images. I make studies. It's usually when you see the body of work of most artists, you see the research, and it's a tower of paper, and then you see the finished product, and it's like a 10-page comic. But it's like the books you read in order to do a paper, and you never show those books you read.
Well, we do.
Just a quick question. So you're writing this in English. Are these published again in Spanish? Do you do translation?
How does it work?
Yeah, how does that work?
I write them in Spanish mainly, I guess. Yeah, mainly in Spanish. Some bits come out in English because the reading and the thing is, it's more and more I'm writing a bit more in English, but also my writing is not, I don't go to the page. I keep the stories in my head until I really have to put them on paper just to go to more fine tuning, fine detail, and the research. So I have the story. No, I have the story. I write the bits, and then while I start doing research, I start designing the pages and deciding how many pages, how many scenes I need to tell those stories. So it all happens at the same time. And my script, in a way, it's full of small sketches. So my thinking comes with images. I've never written like a full script, like panel one, this happens, and the text none. Because I'm a visual artist, and it's easier for me. I think I would be interesting, but I would get stuck. So I finished them completely in Spanish. I work in the dialogue. I try to polish it as much as I can, because in the beginning it sounds very basic, but little by little it sounds like voices. And after that, I do a translation myself, and then I work with a writer or anybody that is native, and they help me with it, because it's an adaptation, and you have to not only, it's very slangy, people talk, it's very much street talk, so you have a lot of idiosyncrasies that work differently. If it was maybe published in USA, it would have to change many bits of that, but that makes it feel more, it wouldn't work out, because the same, you have to follow the story, and you have to keep on going. If you, in some moment that interrupts yourself, I already lost you. It's not interesting anymore. I don't believe you because you sound funny.
But these are available in Spanish.
Yeah. The thing is, it's easier to print, to have your books wherever you are. So I mainly move them through the festivals, and now through Kickstarter. So if I could have them in Spanish, I would have to be in Peru or Spanish-speaking countries. So I have them available digitally. So digitally, you can have English or Spanish, but in printed, it's only English. In some moment would be really good, but...
So, yeah, we need to wrap up fairly soon.
Yeah, I think...
That's the Kickstarter campaign.
Yeah, that was... after I did Manu, I basically came up with Manu Punun Pilpuyo was just one big story. I needed to arrive to Thought Bubble to one story, and I couldn't draw and write a whole graphic novel in that time. So I chopped the story in 3, and that's how I came with Manu. It was well received. And by the time passed by with Puno, I think we were in the beginning of COVID. So Thought Bubble wasn't going to happen. I was not going to arrive with my book. So I said, okay, I have to go to Kickstarter, if not. And this was a very learning experience, because crowdfunding tools are very full of potential if you know how to use them. Obviously, it helps a lot if you have already people following your work, interested in your work, and you think in festival, and they know a bit about. So if you have some people curious about it, and if you know some professionals that maybe can share your work and all that. So, but in this case, I made a comic, I draw it, I write it, but when you put it on a crowdfunding campaign, you stop being the artist and you're the editor and publisher of the comic. So you have to use completely a different set of tools. You're the salesman. You have to talk how amazing this comic is, and then you will like it, and you have to try to talk to as many people as you can about the same thing, trying to not sound the same all the time, and basically promote it. It's selling and promoting the book. You're the book's publisher. It's a different voice. And towards the end, you have to be very careful because in the end, you're going to be shipping a lot of books, and you have to be very careful with how you handle your funds, and you have to crunch a lot of numbers so it will make sense. A lot of campaigns have a lot of trouble because they didn't calculate well the numbers of shipping, that more and more is getting more and more expensive, and they have, in the end, they spent more money. They had to spend money. Even though you receive all the money, they didn't calculate it enough. So you have to basically be your administrator yourself. I don't know, you have to be best friends with Excel, that I didn't know it was like the dream of a comic creator, but it looks like you need it. You have to organize yourself, how you manage all these things, because you're not the artist anymore.
Because you went considerably over your time.
Yes, that's also, and you never know. And in this case, the people that were interested in buying my comic, most of them bought my comic, but the platform itself has a lot of people being curious about independent products or things that they've never seen. And that gives you a reach that is a lot bigger. So a lot of people got interested in my book that they didn't know. For the first time, they saw, I didn't know it's like a comic festival, only online and with people looking for it. So basically, you reach to many more readers, and even.
You built up following very quickly. We were talking yesterday with the paper channel guys, and they were saying, you know, if you worked on the X-Men, so if you like my work on X-Men, why not? But if you're starting without that kind of track record, as you were right in the beginning. How did you build up that fan base?
Festivals. There was a comic festivals. Social media keeps you there and makes you grow little by little, but festivals are kind of the first engine that makes you burn. And also comic festivals.
And the Kickstarter platform.
Yeah.
You got a lot of
and the community. Because you form clusters of communities. You have peers that are interested in your work, and these followers and people interested in their work will say, "Hey, check this out." So it kind of spreads a lot more. So from many places, but especially if they don't know you, if you've never been in festivals and you're not part of the community, it's a bit harder because it's more like a cold start. But you already have some interest. So I don't know. I don't know. Somebody doesn't know my work, but you talk about my work, and they like your taste, so they might get interested in my work, at least a bit curious about it. So it's also word of mouth. And I was lucky enough that even some professionals share my work, and that also gets more traction towards people. But it's basically talking about the comic and use all the tools you can and to keep being on social media and talking about the actual comic. Yeah, that was the thing. It's I don't know how he got to mine Ram V bucket. Also, I don't know, but it happens because you see these big names that are also curious on different things that in some moment maybe something happens, you never know, but that's exactly how it works out. Yeah.
Yeah, so we should
wrap up.
wrap up. Any final comments, questions at this stage? No?
I don't.
Want to say anything else?
Not really. I mean, definitely I plan on, like I show in the map before, I plan on keep on making story and exploring more things. Probably I won't be doing more this kind of books, but more like I plan to be bigger books. It's easier.
The next step should be, you got the three, you have the story.
Mm-hmm.
You want to do a collection, you're looking for a publisher.
First, I will look for a publisher, and so right now, yeah, I'm chasing that. And at the same time, if I make another Peruvian cyberpunk story, it's going to be another story, but it's going to be a full book. It may be bigger because it's easier to get into libraries and bookshops. And these small ones are a bit harder to keep track on. And you have to, unless you're, I don't know, being published by a bigger company, and you don't have to complain that much about it. But yeah, no, I will definitely keep on making my comics while some people keep me job and I draw their things.
Good. Great. Well, I'm sure there'll be a big market. So, thanks so much for starting coming.
Thank you so much.